First off, I just want to say that this channel is different from all the other YouTube channels. What do I mean by this? Because if you are like me and you have a Mavic drone or any other drone, you want to get the best possible result and putting the minimum amount of effort into it. What I'm talking about is taking every possible shortcut there is to maximize your results. We will now go through the settings that I use for my DJI MAVIC Pro. We will do this rather fast and we will not give a shit about the things we don't need to know. I'm gonna go through the camera settings today for the Mavic. There is probably like 1,000 opinions about which settings is the best to use, but I don't really care because the settings I use, they look good in the finished video. Now, making a drone video or pretty much any kind of video, you have to look at it as a full cycle. You will need to master all the steps to get a great final product. Now, mastering this whole process gonna take you through a lot of steps, and I think camera settings and gear is like the first one you need to know. In the next video I'm gonna go through the best settings for your drone to get smooth shots. But today it's camera settings. Before we dive into the settings menu, I pretty much shoot all videos in 4K, 3840 by 2160, 30 frames per second. As a project setting I use 1080p. And I downsize all the 4K files to 1080p. This is called downsizing and it gives you a lot of cool advantages. For example, if your horizon is crooked, you can always correct that in post if you shoot 4K. You just tilt the picture a bit and zoom in and you still get a good video. And this will still look great in 1080p. Also, you can do the vertigo effect. When you're flying forward you can zoom out a bit, or when you're flying backward you can zoom in. So all this is really nice. But to get into the settings, we first need a drone. And we then need a controller. Alright, so let's go through the settings. First thing you want to make sure is that you are shooting in manual mode. To check this, you press the button right here, little slider. And you make sure you are in manual. This is auto, but you want to be in manual mode. The general rule is that for getting a nice cinematic look, you want the right amount of something called motion blur. And this means that you want to have the shutter speed twice the amount of the frame rate. So I'm shooting 30 frames per second, meaning I want the shutter speed at 1/60. So the shutter speed can be changed here. If you're shooting PAL 25 or 24 frames per second, you probably want to go with 1/50. Why do I use 30 instead of 24? Well, as I said before, I don't really care. It looks good. 24 probably works great as well. The only way to have a shutter speed of 60 is if you use an ND filter. If you don't have an ND filter, your picture will be overexposed. I recommend the Polar Pro ND filters. I use the ND8, 16 and 32. These are not the combined ones, which are polarized, just a regular ND filter, the cheap ones. They work great for me most of the times. I don't think you're gonna need anything else. So if you fly your drone up in the air and you found out that the ND16 is just a bit too dark, then I would suggest you raise the ISO a bit instead of going down, putting on the ND8 and you have an overexposed image. If you are raising the ISO to get a good image, I would go about 200, maybe 400, but I wouldn't recommend going higher. If you're shooting at night, you can maybe go for 800, but over 800, you're really starting to destroy the image. So 100 is great, but 200 and 400 works out as well. If you are flying in the air taking pictures, things you need to be good at is quickly changing the focus and quickly changing the ISO while you are recording. So this is good to practice to never miss any good shots. I often find myself changing the ISO in the air, but never ever change the shutter speed if you want to keep the motion blur. Okay, let's go into tab number 2 here. First off is the video size. I shoot 4K 30 frames per second, the 3840 over 2160. You can use the bigger one if you like to, but I think this one is good. Why? Well, we don't care about why, we just want to know the settings that works. Let's check it the video format. I heard that MOV is for if you're using an Apple computer, maybe Final Cut Pro X. MP4 is more based if you're using a Windows computer, but I'm not sure, but I go with MOV. NTSC or PAL, this is a region thing. I think pretty much both of them works. PAL is 25 frames per second, NTSC is 30. I go for NTSC because I shoot everything in 30. White balance, well, the only thing that is really important is that you never have auto on your white balance, because it's gonna change while you are flying with your drone, messing up your video. I use custom 5500 Kelvin. Style. Okay, so this part is really important. Previously, people used -2 or 3 on sharpness, the first one here. Then later some smart guy figured out that, hey, that causes a lot of noise, this is not good for the Mavic. So with the DJI Mavic, the latest is that you want to use at least +1 to get a sharp image, or not a blurry or a mushy looking image. Second line is contrast. I don't care about that. Somebody reduces it to -1, 2 or 3, but I choose 0. Then you have the saturation. Many people lower this as well, but I don't care. 0 works out great. It looks good when I'm grading it later. Okay, color. So previously D-Log was the thing you wanted to use, then there was a DJI update, and now everybody says that D-Cinelike is the thing that you want to use. I pretty much want a flat color profile so that I can do color grading later in post-production. But if you don't want to do color grading, maybe you want to go for something else like normal or art or something else. Just test it out a bit, but with the technique I'm using, I go for D-Cinelike and then later I do color grading. Let's jump into tab number 3 here, settings. Alright, so pretty much the basic settings, but there are a few things that I have learned which I would like to share to you. The overexposure warning, I really like to have that one activated so you can see when your image is overexposed. Also you have grid lines. I would recommend using grid lines, the middle one. Also use center point so that you know which way you are going. This is like a crosshair, like on a gun or something. So you can point it at any direction and you can see where you're going. Also you can easily see if you are drifting, if your compass isn't calibrated or something like that. The biggest reason for the grid lines, well, that's pretty much that you want to use the rule of 1/3. If you have water, you want 1/3 of water, 1/3 of the sky, and 1/3 of the rocks or the terrain below to make a nice composition. And finally, you have something called file index mode. You can use continuous or reset. You want to change that to continuous, because if you are taking a lot of pictures with your drone, every time you format your card, it will start at 0. And if you store your pictures in the same folder, then it's gonna complain about the pictures having the same name, and it will be a mess in your folder. So I suggest you get a continuous file index mode. We can really quickly just go into the picture settings here. If you press this button, you go for pictures. Pretty much I usually go with the same, and also with the ND filter on. I never change it, it looks great. Photo settings, I only shoot 4/3, I go for RAW. These 3 here, white balance, style and color, since it's a RAW file, it shouldn't really matter. So you can put in whatever you like there. And down at the bottom you have format your SD card. I have never pressed that button in my life, and the reason for that is that when the drone fires up, you get the status menu right here that comes up with your overall status. And right down here at the bottom, you have a format button, so you can use that one if you like to. You don't really have to go all the way in here to settings and down to the bottom. I suggest going with this one at the top. So that's pretty much it with the settings. In the next video, I'm going to show you what settings you can use for your drone to get smooth shots. And later I also will show you what you can do with the footage you got in the editing, with grading and so on. So if you like my channel, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I'm gonna make a lot of more videos, tutorials, where we're taking the shortcut to maximize our video quality, but without having to learn all the stuff that the pros do. It's all about getting there the easy way. So I see you in the next one.